The authorities appear to finally be cracking down on the growing number of business hijackings in South Africa. Businessman Sandi Majali was arrested yesterday for allegedly removing 2 directors of mining company Kalahari Resources, replacing them with himself and a number of other people. Now, these hijackings have been blamed on loopholes at the Companies and Intellectual Property Registrations Office. Joining me to take this further is David Loxton. He's director at Werksmans Attorneys. David, thanks very much for coming in. Well, this sounds like a positive development. Do you think it's going to end here, though?
Stephen, that's an interesting question because, company hijackings has been something which we've come across over time for the last couple of years. This is the first time I've seen action taken, and one would hope that it's going to continue. We will see more arrests. Of course, the history of I think, fraud, white-collar crime in South Africa does not paint a good picture because we very seldom see people being brought to book. But I'm certainly hoping that we get to see not only the criminal side being followed through, but of course Cipro itself has taken some measures to try and close the loopholes, and one would hope that that would also go a long way to stamping out this trend.
How were those loopholes able to accommodate things like this, though, these company hijackings?
Well, the loopholes, as I understand it, and bear in mind I'm sort of going what I've read in the press and the media and people I've spoken to, very much collusion, and an insider at Cipro exploited the loopholes to allow outsiders and himself to be appointed as directors. And simply it was a case of removing directors from the database and reinstating them with others. Now, of course, as you probably are aware, to remove directors, you are required to follow certain formalities in terms of the Companies Act. Those are simply ignored. So now, to stamp out that loophole, for example, Cipro is requiring that certified copies of the notice of the meeting itself will be filed before people can be removed.
Okay, because previous to this, Cipro only really investigated these things after director changes were made within their registrars.
Absolutely.
Isn't it right? Yeah.
Yes, correct.
And of course, Kalahari is just one of the high-profile cases that has come to the media. But there have been a number of other cases as well over the course of the past couple of years. And this really can't instill much confidence in corporate South Africa and for companies wanting to register with Cipro and hope that they're not abused going forward.
Correct. In fact, I did a very interesting case sometime, well, not sometime, quite recently, where exactly that happened, where a foreign multinational walked away from South Africa. They wrote off some 15 to 20 million rands, and they said, well, we're out of this country. And their whole business was hijacked from them, from under their feet. So it doesn't instill confidence, and that's why I think it's imperative that the authorities do crack down. We do see not only Cipro close the loopholes, but certainly people being brought to book and their conduct being stamped out. David,
to your knowledge, is this unique to South Africa? Do you have similar abuses elsewhere around the world?
Well, it's an interesting question. I was mentioning this again to an investor from overseas a few months ago, and he said to me, funny you should say that, but we had exactly the same happen to us in Germany.
In Germany, okay, so
it's
a
not
very
unique.
advanced economy.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, just looking at the Departments of Trade and Industry, because of course this does fall under the Departments of Trade and Industry, yes. Do you think they have to take any blame for what's happened over the past couple of years with these company hijackings?
Yes, I think, look, it's a very, that's a question I could say in the next slide.
Lax legislation.
It's lax legislation. It's also, I think, not proper checking on who's employed by you, where I'm saying inside the department itself. One has to have people who understand the potential loopholes to be able to stamp them out. As I say, it takes one to know one. So the department must get competent officials in place to ensure that these things don't happen. So yes, I think that a large degree of blame can be laid at their door.
Of course, we have seen similar loopholes in our mining legislation as well. So it appears to be in a number of legislation in South Africa. Do you think the authorities are moving quickly enough when we do uncover these loopholes to try and close them up?
Well, I think, again, Cipro has moved very quickly. Generally, bureaucrats don't move quickly anywhere in the world. So it's quite pleasing to see that Cipro has moved quickly to stamp out these loopholes. In answer to your question, at a general level, no. The authorities don't move quickly enough. I mean, this thing has been going on for a couple of years, and there's been nothing happening. It took a very high-profile case to, I think, force Cipro to stamp this out.
If you go back a few months to July, there was also a case of foreign syndicates cloning companies and registering them with Cipro to appropriate millions of rands in tax refunds, and also opening up fictitious bank accounts. Now, what legal standing do banks in South Africa have when things like this happen? Because bank accounts are being accessed through some of these hijackings.
Again, we've got the legislation in place. The banks are required to do proper checks and balances. Again, and unfortunately, anybody you talk to who deals with white-collar crime will tell you that the hardest aspect to stamp out is collusion. So you get one crooked official in a bank working with outsiders or organized crime, it's going to be very, very difficult to stamp that out. So the legislation is in place. The banks are required to report and to investigate when it comes to potential money laundering, or people opening up accounts that one must check their IDs, etc., etc. But if you get a crooked official in the bank, it's not going to work. It's not going
perhaps taking another comparison, perhaps. I mean, if you look at white-collar crime in general, do you think it's growing in South Africa? Do you think it is scaring off investors to South Africa? Do you think it's a global phenomenon?
I can answer that very simply. When I was in the States recently, the perception of the Americans I spoke to was that South Africa is worse than Nigeria. And that is a very scary statement to hear from foreigners. The perception is that white-collar crime is not being dealt with. And that, I think, would scare off foreign investors, yes.
And are we going to get to change that perception by dealing with it and having it on the front page of our newspapers?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Of course, what's going to happen to the legal profession? Because I'm sure you guys are making some money out of cases like these.
That's a question you couldn't ask about the legal profession. But yes, it's obviously the cynical side of me says, yes, it's great because it keeps us in a job. But at a practical level, it's very sad to see that perception outside the country is that we are not a great place to invest because the white-collar crime is too high, that your money might be at risk if you invest here. And sadly, the legislation is all in place. We have world-class legislation. It's just the implementation thereof that is at fault.
Do you think the measures that CIPRA has taken so far are enough to stamp out company hijackings, or do you think we're going to see more cases cropping up?
Well, that of course is again a very interesting question, because I've always thought that if these crooks would only apply their minds to legitimate business, they'd do very well. So I personally think what CIPRA has done should go a long way. I personally can't think of any other measures that can take place, but I'm sure there are lots of crooks out there that are busy planning the next step right now as we speak. So only time will tell if there are enough, but I think their steps so far have been very, very good.